Oh, no.
We would all disagree with that.
Okay, my family moved to, my grandparents moved to Los Angeles from Minnesota in the early 1900s, and they settled up by where Dodger Stadium is now, and opened a garage. And somehow they built some money because they managed to spend $1,000 to buy a beach house in the 200 block of 4th Street in 1917. They also bought in one of the most wonderful financial transactions. They bought about 40 acres out where Marineland is now, and then traded it straight across for 10 acres in the Simi Valley, which is in retrospect a horrible thing. Except they're probably one of those nasty trust fund guys up there, you know, that is a pain in the butt right now if that had happened. Because they had a railroad that ran to the Simi Valley, and no one wanted to go to Palos Verdes. You couldn't even hardly get there. So it seemed like a brilliant move at the time, and 100 years later, not so brilliant. But, so I was born in the Simi Valley, and I lived there till I was 1. My mom and dad had met up there, and my dad got a job in the post office in 1940, which was a great job because the checks didn't bounce, it was still the Depression. And he was headquartered at the Burbank Airport. And so we all moved to Burbank when I was 1. And then, when in 1944, the post office announced that they were moving the headquarters of the post office to Manhattan, to the LAX. And it really had to relocate, because I don't know if you remember back that far, but it was a full day trip to get to the San Fernando Valley and back. It was 2 hours each way to commute. So everybody had to move. And this is an interesting story because there were about 25 workers, and they all relocated. Now it was easy for us because we had the beach house in Manhattan. But all the others had to go find new places to live. And out of the 25, 1 chose the beach area, Manhattan Beach. All the others went to Hawthorne, Inglewood, and Westchester because those were the up-and-coming places. Very few people wanted to live full-time in this run-down resort beach town of Manhattan Beach.
Yeah.
So about 50 years later, I took my dad to a wedding reception, one of his former co-workers, and their oldest daughter and I had grown up together, and she came and she said, "I'm really mad at you." She said, "Why?" Because you moved to Manhattan Beach and my parents chose Westchester. So anyway, I lucked out. So I moved here when I was 4. Started kindergarten at Grandview School. They had buses that ran to the schools back then. It was the only school west of the highway that was an elementary school. They hadn't opened Pacific or Robinson, was just a dream. And because we didn't need it. But then the school started getting more crowded, and we went on half-day session in the 3rd grade, where the early class had to be there from 7:30 to noon, and then the others would come from 12:30 till 4 or so. And it's interesting because in the 3rd and 4th grade, I rode my bike from 4th Street by Highland to Grandview. And I just went down Crest, and I went through, and nobody thought anything of it. We all rode our bikes or walked to school a mile. And now parents seem to be afraid to drop their kids off more than 100 feet from the school. and there have been absolutely 0 kids abducted since I was a kindergarten to today. But because of all the publicity and all the things, it's a real shame, because I know that Blue Zones is trying to get walking school buses and getting kids to walk to school, which is totally safe, and it's ridiculous that we smother these kids. I changed the subject a bit. I met some people in Europe and who lived in New York. And I had dinner with them once, and she's a college professor, and we were talking about these kids that don't, and she talked about it, how she's a college professor. She talked about how she wanted to have a field trip with her class, and they were going to meet at Grand Central Station. And she got calls from parents saying, "My kid can't go by himself to Grand Central Station. This is college age." True story. But anyway, so I grew up in Manhattan, and it was an entirely different town, as most of you know. We would go walking in the back country, and the back country we called it, which was basically east of Ardmore. Probably a dozen houses between Ardmore and Sepulveda and Manhattan Beach Boulevard and Hermosa. And everything else was vacant lots. And it was wonderful growing up that way. There were a lot of vacant lots down at the beach too. So it was a great place to grow up. But it wasn't, you look back and you think of all the wonderful things, but you don't remember the fact there was barbed wire fence along the ocean because it was so polluted because the Hyperion was throwing raw sewage into the ocean. My dad worked for the post office, and twice a month he got paid. And those 2 times a month we'd go out to dinner. And to get a decent dinner, you had to leave town. There wasn't a decent restaurant in the whole town except Bay 90s, which was full of smoke. It was dark, and my parents weren't about to take me there. Of course, no, No offense to Don, but my parents weren't about to let me go to El Porto.
Surf and sand.
There's bars there.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, went through the schools, went from Grandview to Center at Intermediate School, and then I went to Miracosta and graduated in '58 from Miracosta, and had no clue what I wanted to do in life. So my parents and aunt decided I should be an engineer because the Sputnik had gone up a year before when I was a junior, and we listened to it in our physics class. So anybody who could add 2 and 2 and get anywhere near 4 was going to be an engineer because we had to catch up with the Russians. So I went to UCLA as an engineer, absolutely despised it. After a year and a half, quit and ran out of money. So now the question is, what are you going to do with your life? So I didn't know, so I got a job in the Manhattan Beach post office and took an aptitude test at El Camino, and they said you got to be one of 3 things: an engineer, an accountant, or a farmer. Well, I already crossed out engineer. Didn't think I wanted to be a farmer, so that didn't leave much. So I took some accounting classes and seemed to be pretty good at it, and went from El Camino to Long Beach State. And I worked in the post office. I carried mail at every one of your houses, I guarantee it. I was a clerk working inside. I had to be at work at 3:30 in the morning, 6 days a week, and then work till 9. And then go to school, and so it was not a real college experience. It was but I didn't have any choice because nobody had any money back then, and my parents couldn't put me through school. So, but if somebody got sick, I'd go out and carry a mail route, which was great because I could carry any mail route. You're given 5 hours to do it, and I could do them in 3, so I could do it real fast and study, and or go to the beach. So I carried mail to every house. I carried mail to every single house in this entire town. And the town changed so much since back then. This was in the 60s, and early 60s. So then, back then you still had the draft. Now I met my wife, which is an interesting story because she was also born in Manhattan, New York. And her father was a very successful doctor, and that was her track road. She was on to become a doctor, and she was in an upstate New York school and hated it. So in her junior year, she transferred to UC Santa Barbara, and happened to room with my cousin, who thought we'd be a perfect match. And I set up a blind date to meet her at her house in North Hollywood, and I walked in and fell in love instantly, and she said she did too. And,
There you are.
so, there was never any doubt about it once I saw her, and she's the best thing ever happened to me in my life. But what was funny story is, after we dated a few times, and she wrote a letter to her dad, and she said, Dad, Mom, I said, Dear Dad, Mom, I really like California. I met this guy, and I'm in love with him, and I want to marry him. He works in the post office and surfs. So you can guess who's on the next plane out to California to talk some sense into this young woman who obviously got off track. So he finally, after about 30 years, accepted me. So anyway, so I'm getting ready to graduate, and this was pre-Vietnam, and all you had to do back then to get out of the Army, I was a student deferment, but once you graduated, you're draft eligible. No war going on, and but all you had to do back then to get out of the Army was to get married. And so this sounds hokey. Unfortunately, this sounds hokey in today's environment, but I joined the Army Reserves and became a finance officer, and I did it for 2 reasons. One, because I thought I owed this country something, and that's unfortunately not the case so much nowadays. And the second reason was I didn't want my wife to think I married her to get out of the Army. So anyway, so I got a job. I got out of the Army. I'd already had a job at the CPA firm and went to work in Long Beach. And then my wife and I figured we couldn't afford, after we got married, to live in Manhattan Beach because we didn't have the extra $20 it took to have an apartment. So we got an apartment in Torrance. And then we figured our future is Long Beach, so we bought a house in Long Beach. And then a horrible incident happened that changed our life for the better. I don't know if you've ever seen a movie called Sliding Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow. It's a fabulous movie. And it's basically 2 lives. She loses her job, she walks down to ride home in the underground, and the sliding doors close and she misses the train. She calls her boyfriend, who's now in bed with a mistress, and says, I got fired, I'm coming home, so he kicks the mistress out. Then he goes back, and it's a different story. She goes down the stairs, she just makes the door, gets in the train, gets home, finds them together. And then there's two different movies about how her life changed because of an incident. And if you think of your own lives, my wife deciding she didn't want New York. Our sliding door incident involves when my aunt lived 2 doors down from us, and this is 1970. She was 80 years old. And my mom and her were going to go shopping somewhere, and she got the car out of the garage, and something happened, we'll not know. It went out of control, went up the hill, smashed into our house where my brother was sitting there on the phone. And my mom ran up to see what had happened, and my aunt put it in reverse and like that, knocked her back on her head. My brother called the paramedics, took her to the hospital. He called us, living in Long Beach. We met her at the hospital. She said, I got a horrible headache. They transferred her to Kaiser because she had Kaiser insurance. By the time they got there, she'd gone into a coma and never came out of it. So, horrible story. Horrible thing. So that summer, my aunt went to Scotland, and her house was empty. My dad was not doing well, so my wife and I said, we'll spend the summer living with her in her house and take care of Dad. And we got there and we said, what are we doing living in Long Beach? Sold the house in Long Beach, bought the house right across the street in 1970, and lived here ever since. So I was out of Manhattan Beach for 3 years, basically. And it changed our life. That horrible incident was our sliding door that totally changed our life. I have no idea what would have happened otherwise, but it made our life far better. We had close family ties. My brother lived right next door. My kids grew up knowing their grandfather. I got to be on the city council and do things in this town that I never would have done if I'd been in a huge city like Long Beach. So, a horrible incident, and we're better off. You know, my family and my future. It's probably had a much better life because of it, but it's still a horrible incident. So anyway, I'm back in Manhattan Beach and think I want to see if I can contribute something. So I apply for a commission and get appointed to the Planning Commission, and did that for 5 years. And then people said you ought to run for city council. So I did, and I won. I won overwhelmingly because everywhere I went, people said, I voted for you because your mother was really nice. And it was an incredible experience, serving on the city council. It's a real honor and privilege, and I think we did some really good things. And there was a team, because I say we, I don't say me, because it's always a we on a city council, because you need to work together with other people and make things happen. It's not working very well in Washington, but in Manhattan Beach back then it worked really well. And we had some really good people. I learned so much from Bill Switzer, who's one of the finest gentlemen I've ever met in my life. He was the epitome of what's good about public service. He taught me how to treat people, how to respect them and look at both sides of an issue, and he was a great mentor for me, and I'll miss him always because he had a hugely positive influence on my life. But we look back at what we accomplished, you know, I mean, the whole Manhattan Mall was built back then, and it came out beautifully. And we negotiated a deal to buy the railroad right away from Santa Fe, which created permanent open space. And we negotiated a deal with TRW to create that whole Marine Avenue Park complex. It had really no cost to the city. And we streamlined government. We got rid of the city trash business and contracted it out, and everybody's bill went down 25%, and they got better service. And we basically made the city financially much stronger. That's why it's one of the strongest cities in the nation now. And you know, we cut deals to create the Marriott Hotel on city-owned land, generates millions of dollars a year in revenue without taxing. We're the only city in the South Bay that does not have a utility tax on your gas bill, your electric bill, and your water bill. Lowest taxes of any city, and we have the highest level of services. And my wife was also involved. She did a wonderful job helping create the Neighborhood Watch program. John and Ann Martin helped right at the start with the Manhattan Beach 10K run when we came up with that idea. They were on that committee for years. John was the treasurer, and wearing one of the shirts. And, we started out just on a whim, making a little local race, and became one of the top 100 races in the country because we had a really great group of people. So it was a great experience, and I'm really proud of what we accomplished as a group. The last thing we've been involved with were the Special Olympics host town games. And it was the neatest thing I think we've done in years in this community, and the whole community stepped up. One of my friends, John Peets, is on the Special Olympics board, and he came up with the idea, wanted to get us involved, so we got the school board and the city council involved, and we had hundreds of volunteers putting on events. And meeting these people from Hungary and Nepal was one of the greatest things that's happened. And Charlotte and I, one of the most exhausting things we ever did was the two of us took the Nepal people, 8 of them, to Disneyland by ourselves. Picked them up at 6:30 in the morning, got to Disneyland when it opened at 8, and left Disneyland like 10:15 at night. And the entire day, I had to, they were dressed fortunately in shirts, because I work for Body Glove, and I still work, I have no exit strategy. And we printed up t-shirts for all the athletes and all the volunteers. Somehow I got hooked into doing 5 cities. I thought I was just going to do Manhattan. But they had these bright blue shirts with the logos on them. And so my job all day was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I got 8 of them. On the way, there's only 7. What do I do with that 8th one? People don't speak English and are mentally challenged. What if I lose one? But we didn't. And it was incredibly rewarding. And a week after, Charlotte and I were driving somewhere and her phone rang in her car and the Bluetooth thing, and we answered, and the guy says, "Is this Charlotte?" And she says, "Yeah." He says, "Well, this is Dr. I can't pronounce his last name, from Nepal. We just wanted to call you and tell you we all got back safely. It was the most wonderful experience of our life. The United States is the best country and the most friendly country, and Manhattan Beach people are the best. We had a time of our life we'll never forget you." Sob, choke. It was so cool. I mean, what's better than that? So I work for Body Glove. I've been involved with them for 50 years, 25 years as a CPA and 25 years full-time trying to run the place. It's owned by 2 families. It was started by Bill and Bob Maestro in '53. They're both deceased, but I've got 2nd and 3rd generation people working there, and some people we pay to not work there. It's cheaper to pay them to stay away. But they got some really good people, and we've done really well. And it's the classic story of American capitalism at its best. Because in 1953, here's 2 guys, lifeguards, no money, no education, no family connections, no ties, to anybody powerful, and they come up with it. They're cold in the water, and they want to find a way to stay warm. And they find out and they make the first neoprene wetsuits and create an entire culture, and tens of thousands of jobs have been created because of their idea. And this is the way it's supposed to work. And I'm proud to be involved with them. And it's the only surf company that was started in the 50s or 60s that's still owned and operated by the family that started it. Every single other one, from OP to O'Neill to Ripco to Quicksilver to Billabong to her, you name them all. They've all either sold out, gone bankrupt, or been acquired by Target or Moss or something like that. We're the only one left. I'm the only shareholder of the company that's not a family member. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes there's this family here, this family here, me in the middle, and I feel like the only fire hydrant on a street full of male dogs.
Remember, this is going to be online. So.
Anyway, what can I say? It's true. Anyway, that's about it. Life is good. Our 3 children are all grown up, and they're doing very well. A lot of people know my son Tim Lesser. He's a urologist. He's a very good surgeon. People come up to me and say, "Dr. Tim your son Tim is my doctor," and I usually say, "I'm sorry." But he's very good, very proud of him. And our oldest son Greg is a assistant U.S. attorney, puts bad guys away to make our lives safer. And my daughter is married with, and her oldest granddaughter is a sophomore at Cal State Long Beach. And what's fun for me is we play in a band called Thin Ice, of course, and we play Pollywog, and we play the hometown fair, and my 2 sons, and now 2 of my granddaughters are in the band, the 19-year-old and the 13-year-old, and she's really good. And she'll be playing at the hometown fair Sunday at noon to 1:30 at the little Jocelyn Center stage. And if you can come out and do it, see us, we'd appreciate it, and we have a lot of fun doing it. What could be better at age 75 than being in a rock band with your sons and your granddaughters? It doesn't get any better than that. So that's about it. That's my life today.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Does anybody have questions for us?
Okay.
Thank you very much for all that you've done.
Well, you get a lot more by giving than you do by getting.
Yes.